Number two, but they not afraid to die anymore. Because Costco teaches you how to let go. Before I get to the store, in my car, I do a quick little meditation / pep rally. I said, we're about to go to a hostile environment. You already know there's going to be some injustice. There's going to be straight up atrocities. Speak up when you can, accept things you cannot change. Less Costco. If I can't find parking in under 8 minutes, I drive away. Let it go, dude. That's okay. Today is not the day. I'm not going to force it. It's Costco. I'm going to respect it like the ocean. That's not my schedule. That's...
Well, with that, we'll start off with Bless Costco. Welcome to Flow State, the show formerly known as the Webflow Show, where we take Webflow and Costco and design seriously and honestly nothing else. So we got another banger for you today. As always, we got your boys, Matt and Hein here.
What's up?
It's definitely not going to be a skip. So if you're feeling the vibes, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to future shows, and make sure you never miss out on the most fun you could possibly have talking about design, Webflow, and no-code dev. So let's start the show. Bless Costco.
Bless Costco.
We were chatting a little bit about this before, like filming, but me being from California and you having lived in California, we definitely have gone through the experience of the ocean that is the Costco experience. And it's not something that you experience so much now here in the Midwest, but it's definitely still a thing with the gas. Like, you pretty much roll in there and you're like, this could take a couple minutes, this could be taking a couple hours. Like, I'm just gonna go with the flow. Like, I accept this. I gotta get this gas. I probably might run out of gas before I get to the gas pump, but yeah, it's a thing.
I think that's the whole genius of Costco is like, it's a hard place to shop from like a time boxed way. Like, I always think like I'm probably the closest person on earth to treating Costco like a convenience store. Like, I will literally pop in and out for like 2 items and just like close my eyes to the like 4 packs of toothbrushes and whatnot that are going on. But
Yeah.
it's always like an hour, either in the parking lot or in the store. Pick your poison.
Yeah, especially if you sit down and enjoy some of those delicious hot dogs that Matt and I will give 2 thumbs up, enthusiastic thumbs up for, which inspired the hats and all the branding and the swag. So if you're interested in the swag, feel free and grab yourself some. We'll put up a store link for that, since we've gotten some people telling us how much they like it and they want to buy it. And we don't believe them until they give us that hard, cold cash.
That's right. Send us in coins and dollars only.
Pre-Civil War era coins.
That's right.
All right, so that's enough like talking about Costco for now. We're actually going to jump into the show where we talk about just code. You know, the thing that everybody wants to talk about as a designer is code. So here we are talking about how designers can use Webflow as a gateway to learning actual code, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So yeah, I'm sure every designer watching this right now is super stoked, super excited.
Yeah.
And the best thing about that is, like, if you don't have any context about that, you see this creepy ass man.
Good luck. Yeah, it felt right to drop that GIF like right after code. Like, we're coming in with the like the bitterest possible taste for designers. But before you slam your laptop shut, hear us out. Making this move for ourselves, like, just to try to sweeten the pot a little bit. Making this move for ourselves, like, it was something like 5x or 7x. I'm not a big X'd person, but just to quickly underscore, like, us doing what we're talking about today was like a huge deal for us as an agency and as designers. I know it just made us feel a lot more capable, and we'll get into it more as we go throughout the show. But it's like, even if you're like, not for me, it made me a much better designer. I know you and I have had lots of conversations about that. It's like, even if you don't want to sell it, you're so much better prepared as a designer, and to kind of do a good job. It just gives you a lot better perspective about what you're designing for on the website of things. So yeah, it made a very real change for us on the revenue side and on the knowledge side. And it's like, that's a pretty good thing to choose to invest in. And if nothing else, it can bridge that gap a little bit more and help you avoid like all the nuances of your beautiful wireframes and Figma, just that you scream cried into existence during the wireframing phase, just sort of not making the cut on the dev side. So that's another thing that hopefully you want as well.
Yeah, well, I do want that, and I think the people who are listening to the show want that. So let's jump right into it. Let's get into HTML first. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things with this that we didn't caveat yet is we didn't sort of set out with this in mind as like this would be a great way for us to learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever it was. So like this sort of happened through us to us by using Webflow organically, and I think that's why it came to mind for us to talk about like more specifically today. Like what if we knew this going in? This probably we would have probably used Webflow sooner and maybe approached it with that mindset of like, hey, this is actually gonna like expand our opportunities as a business through better dev knowledge, basically, and better, like more structurally sound design.
Yeah, exactly. I think immediately I just thought of like a client who, they sent the project over to us and was like, and really at the end of the day, the dev work is really kind of like is the big question mark, and I think you and I both having some more experience in dev now because of our experience working as designers in Webflow immediately allowed us to be like, okay, these are some potential options. We just need to understand like what exactly you're looking for. But this is not a conversation we would have been able to have with them if this was like 2 years ago or something like that. We just been like, yeah, we can do it, and then realize like, nope, we can't do this. We gotta find a dev who can do this for us, and then pay that out of our pocket because we didn't set the expectation with the client. So yeah, there's a lot to this that's really important, and we found valuable, as you already said. So it's worth sharing with others who are enjoying the show.
Yeah, so jumping into it, if you found this show or this is the first episode, just to like hit what Webflow actually is. It's like a no-code like visual design platform. If you're a designer in the web design world, you probably know of it by now. You probably found our channel somehow typing that word in, so shouldn't be too much of a surprise. But at a high level, it sounds similar to a lot of other platforms. Which means you can design websites by dragging and dropping elements onto the page rather than having to like actually write out code, right? That's become sort of table stakes at this point as a selling point. It's sort of the expectation. But the fun part that we want to focus on today is that as you're designing, assuming you're not just pasting in templates, as you're designing in Webflow, actually doing the dev kind of mindset of it, like you are sort of unwittingly, at least in my case, learning good principles of HTML, CSS, and later JavaScript. JavaScript is never sort of visually apparent in most ways, but those look a lot like interactions and hovers and animations and things like that are usually powered by JavaScript. So you start to sort of build that acumen as you go through and you use their drag and drop things, but you're really dragging and dropping in divs and sections and containers, and you're learning why those things exist in the code.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're saying is we can build a website without writing a single line of code, but still learn coding along the way. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, again, this is sort of a nuanced thing, especially if you're comparing it versus other platforms. And we've done a little bit of that with WordPress in past episodes, and we'll do it more, mostly just to underscore a lot of what we're talking about today. But I think the best part is like you're obviously writing code, but you can see your code come to life in real time, like right as you're designing, and we'll give you a little taste of what that means. But it can feel a little bit like a magic trick at first, especially if you've never used a visual designer of any kind. But for me, a lot of the concepts that were vague to me, like I knew HTML a bit, I understood structure a little bit, understood CSS, from having worked on websites and things like that in the past. But it really sort of came together as I was using the visual builder, like what I was doing. Some of these other bits and pieces that we pick up as designers just by necessity sort of started to make sense from a developer side when I did that. So, it felt a little bit like magic, not in that visual design way, but in the like, oh, okay, like I'm starting to understand like what's really happening in the code with a visual designer. So boom, that was the magic part of that. Like not just seeing it as a designer, but making that connection mentally, like, oh, okay, like this is how I can manipulate these things. Like this is what good structure is bad, or this is what good structure is, this is what bad structure is, and this is how I need to think about things as a designer and ultimately like to get the website in good health on the back end and the front end when you launch for the client.
Yeah, I like to think of it kind of like being able to see like the forest from the trees kind of thing. I think before when we were learning code, like HTML, CSS, like it was very much like, how do I do this thing? And then you go Google it and you drop it in. But from a contextual, like structural standpoint that you were talking about, we may not necessarily be using it correctly, where having Webflow allows us to then kind of actually set it up in the right way. We can see how it is and then take a look. Okay, that's the actual setup that makes sense. So we can actually build this kind of structure together well. Yeah, I have to ask though, given that Webflow is one of the many web platforms out there, and we'll make episodes kind of talking about how it's different from these other ones like Squarespace, Wix, Framer. They're all at the end of the day generating code. So what honestly makes Webflow different?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I do think all these platforms have their place, and so much of it depends on like what you're trying to accomplish with your website, maybe what phase of your business is in, what functions do you need it to have. So we won't use this episode to slam other platforms, but the biggest difference is that the code is clean, and to the point where you can even export it out because it's HTML, CSS. There's no like real secret language that's platform like proprietary on Webflow. Like you can literally just build a website in Webflow, export it out, host it wherever you want. So like that lets you know that, okay, this code is the code. Like the code base is clean. It's strong. It's not some magical thing that the Webflow templates are doing for you or whatever. Like this really is truly like customizable based on what my capabilities are, right? And the more that you can kind of see that in the background of the site, the better it is. So like we're not going to go deeply into like staring at code today. We're already pushing it by talking about code to designers right out of the gate. But shout out to dev mode in the browsers. You'll probably know what I'm talking about. But it allows you to just quickly see what the visual designer is making within Webflow, like to make that one-to-one connection of like dropping a div element into a page and then like seeing what the code looks like, or looking at any website and realizing that you can do that in Webflow, how that might look. That's where that kind of magic part that we've talked about, at least it's just sort of all inside my head for me, but it was just connecting all these sort of disparate pockets of information I had and making it feel like, okay, I'm really doing one thing now when I'm designing a website, instead of multiples that I'm handing off, or I don't really know what the code part of my wireframes is going to turn out to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it definitely can still feel a little overwhelming. I think especially if you, for novice or people who like don't or actively avoid the dev mode, it can look a little crazy. So can you give some tips on how viewers can start getting the ball rolling in Webflow and being able to use it as a way for them to kind of learn code?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of my tips, especially since this is kind of like an intro to the idea, are just like our conversations that we had and what we actually did, things I wish I would have done sooner type of thing, which is, the first step is just to dive in. Like you can sign up for Webflow for free and just sort of make a mess in there if that's what you want to do. But there's a great set of tutorials, of course, for beginners. Like Webflow has some super funny, entertaining videos. So those are great. That definitely like helped me get the ball rolling because it wasn't like the worst thing ever to watch some of their videos. But the best way for me was just to find a website that I thought was cool and just try to rebuild it. Like I just spent a lot of time trying to like make this site kind of doing what we talked about. Like we'll put some screenshots in to maybe show what the dev looks like or whatever. But like you could really see again, like inspect what's going on in the actual code of any website, whether it was built on Webflow or not, and then just try to make it, like try to make your favorite homepage. And the other thing for me is like my first inclination, what I actually did, Hein, I don't know what you did, but I was like, I'm going to make my like perfect ideal website spec site in Figma and it's going to be super cool. And then I'm going to make all the assets and then I'm going to make it in Webflow. It's like, you don't need the reps on the design side if you're a designer. Like, don't do that. You'll get caught into that mode forever. Like, you're a dev. Like, put on the dev hat for this and be like, okay, these people have given me these wireframes, and I'm gonna try to make it as best I can. And I'm gonna like learn code through that process, learn how the structure of a site. And I almost think it's great to find one that's not in Webflow. Just take it and just try to build it. Like that way you're like, this has nothing really to do with Webflow. This is just the tool I'm doing to replicate the behavior of the CSS, the HTML, and even the JavaScript part, whereas like Webflow can carry as much or as little of it as possible, which I think is cool. Like you don't have to know all these things, but it will make you better within the Webflow platform. It'll make your site better outside or inside, like once you launch. So I think that's what's kind of nice about it is you can go kind of quickly, so it never feels like you're bogged down. But just go straight to like replicating designs. Just like, can I do this? How would I do this in Webflow? What does this look like on mobile? All these questions we ask ourselves. But for me, Webflow just made it easy to get started in that way and have a little bit of fun with like, remaking the GitHub website or something like that you think is cool. Like just steal their assets for the moment, right? You're just plugging it in. You're just going through the exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I love the tip of like just kind of rebuilding something that you like, because it's kind of like the old taking apart a watch and seeing how it works kind of thing. And that's literally what we're suggesting here. Any tips on like whether any people should focus on like HTML, CSS, and or like JavaScript, or one over the other? Thoughts there?
I mean, I would always just start with HTML. It's the structure of a website. Like if you're really just starting out, like I always think of like, this is the structure of how things work. It's the thing that's most immediately sort of recognizable when you're talking about divs or when you're inspecting code. And then CSS, for me at least, once I had that, like CSS then made sense, its connection with HTML like pretty quickly. And it also makes sense in how the Webflow platform is laid out. You kind of have your like HTML objects or whatever over on the left. You can add and drop those in, and then you've got your CSS over on the right. And when you really put together like, oh, this is the style and this is the CSS, these are the options, this is what it writes when I make this red or change the font family. Like it's just nice when you load up that designer going forward. Like it looks overwhelming at first, but for me, it just immediately sort of put in like, my left hand side is my HTML, my right hand side is my CSS, inspect the code, see what's happening there, maybe make some changes on either. So they both in reality happened pretty quickly for me, but I think it's good to kind of step through it, especially if you're learning it. It's like, I just want to understand what divs do. Like why do containers live here? Why am I putting a wrap around this kind of stuff? Just answering those questions for yourself, like hands-on and kind of like a playground way, it's kind of fun too. I'm sure some people might just be like, yeah, no, I'm a designer. But again, there's no downside to learning this. It's going to make you better at whatever you kind of choose to sell or make a living at.
Yeah, that makes sense. The foundational building block stuff. So I agree that focusing on HTML makes the most sense. I mean, CSS would be like slapping on a coat of paint, but you don't have a wall built yet.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably the right order, and someone who's actually good at teaching this themselves would, I think, probably say the same thing that we are. All the books that I read, like 14 pages of, seem to start with this approach as well.
I also assume these books that you're reading also say that you shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes and just experimenting.
Yeah, I think they probably said like finish the whole book. Was probably one of the takeaways that I did not get. But yeah, I think so. And I also just think, on that note, like all jokes aside, like if you're a designer coming into dev, like these are two totally disparate careers. Like it's okay if it takes you a little bit of time. Like, like you probably shouldn't believe that you're going to be an incredible dev like 30 days from now unless you're like really putting in hours, but you can get a lot better if you like take an hour every morning and just like build that kind of spec site that you're working on or whatever. Like it will start to click for you, especially after the first couple of weeks, just getting the lay of the land if you're new to Webflow as well. But that's my favorite thing about Webflow, again, is just like it's sort of just organically laid out in such a way that leads you to understand these things. And in, you know, it might also beg the question of like, well, who cares if I can just use this visual designer? I don't need to know this stuff. I think you do. And also, I think the other thing for us, like you mentioned, is we can talk to devs now, like realistically, and we can also solve problems that are not like inherently solvable in Webflow because we're like, oh, everyone knows about the drag and drop HTML embed field in every single platform from Squarespace to WordPress to Wix, right? It's like you can use that now and be very effective with it and do all sorts of really cool things that you can upsell. So there's just a lot in there, but allowing yourself that freedom to like mess some stuff up, try some code snippets, when you get comfortable with that, dabble in some JavaScript on your spec site, but give yourself that like freedom. Like I still feel a little weird talking about myself as a dev, and we're doing an episode about it. And I know you do too. It's like we still think of ourselves as designers, right? So it's like a little weird. We're certainly not the expert devs of the century if you want to build a whole app from the ground up, but we've become pretty capable just by doing what we're talking about today. And I think that's worth sharing, even if it just opens the door to trying it. So like go in and mess some shit up. It's fine.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's just a natural progression of like becoming better designers. It's like you do want to understand things more, and at least that's true for us. And I think that we've gotten to a point where it just sounds like not this not going to sound great, but like a lot of the design stuff is very um, it's like a table stakes kind of thing. We're able to kind of we know that if someone's asking for design, we can knock out the design. That's not going to be a problem. We can get that done. And we found ourselves like getting into the dev space of like, well, how do we like really get this thing to work the right way? How do we connect these things? All of that kind of stuff. And that's really kind of opened the doors for us to start to really kind of see ourselves as like, well, we're not just pure designers. We're actually doing dev work. We should get paid for dev work. And this is another opportunity to, as an agency and studio, like you said, we increase our revenue not by getting more customers, but just being able to help them understand that, hey, this isn't web design. This is pure dev. Like this is what, and this is what you need to pay for it if you want this thing. And yeah, I think we'll get into it more in our notes, but I think it raises like the ceiling for you as a designer dev, right? To be able to add another skill. You and I both being like basketball guys, like you want it, or just a sports people in general, like you want you to have high ceilings because you can train them up, get them to the point, and they have a lot of potential. And I think the world that we live in now with these tools, like it opens up our potential more than they ever have. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of like exactly why we wanted to share this and talk to people about it. And yeah, just kind of get out there and just start giving it a try. It's how we did it. We're not telling you to do something that we didn't do ourselves. So go out and give it a shot. If you've realized that like, hey, I don't like this at all, I'd rather just outsource this dev work to people. Like, cool. At least for sure though.
Yeah, and you'll be able to like outsource better. Honestly, you'll be able to delegate really well, and you'll be able to make your wireframes suited for a dev to do good work. And that can also save you money if you're outsourcing it, if you're paying hourly or whatever. Reduces back and forth. Maybe it's more of an async process all of a sudden, right? So you can put even in comments and stuff in Figma, you're just like, hey, you're probably going to have this question here. Here's what I mean in words. You might not be able to like derive the functional goal of it from the wireframe. So it just makes all those things a little bit better. So I think it's easily worthwhile. And, as in we all have the imposter syndrome thing pretty strongly in the creative world, but this lessens it quite a bit because it's like we know we can at least speak to it. And sometimes too, I think you might have been alluding to the same client earlier. It's like sometimes we know what we can't do by having this knowledge. It's like, hey, yeah, we're like devs to this point. We're really confident to this point, but what you're asking for is like closer to a web app. Like we're probably not your guys to build like an entire software platform. It's like we could trudge our way through it maybe, but like that should be done by someone who has a whole host of like other programming skills and languages sort of under their belt. So it really helps you know like what your true constraints are when you're selling as well, and you're not saying yes to like, oh yeah, we can definitely do that, and then we get on and we're like, can we do that? Can you do that? Kind of like that's a little scary thing because you do lose margin in those things too, right? When you're scoping something and you don't fully understand maybe the level of effort it would take, or even if you're delegating it, how much money a resource like that might cost, etc.
Yeah, I think like the last thing I'll say on this, and then we'll move on to like our next segment, which is opening a can, is just to kind of like reiterate what you're saying is not only does it help you to kind of like better understand like what needs to be done, I think it goes back to ultimately why clients hire you, which is to be the expert. They're asking for something they don't necessarily know how it works, if it can even happen. They just kind of have a dream and they want you to be able to either make it come true or be able to kind of just tell them like, hey, this isn't possible this way. And having the expertise or knowledge behind how this works is only going to kind of help with that, because then you don't like you said, you don't want to be in a position where you're like, yeah, we can make this happen, and then really like, actually we can't. That thing that you wanted so badly that I told you I can't do it. It's better to just be like at the front, be like, hey, this is how this is gonna have to work. We're not sure we can do it. We think we can, but we're gonna give it a try. And if we can't, then we might have to like bring in somebody else. That's a way better answer. And I think most customers, and if a customer doesn't accept that as an answer, like you don't want to work with them because they're not gonna be great. But I would assume most people are gonna be like, yeah, that's okay, as long as you know what needs to be done. That's really what I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes they're like, oh, I couldn't pull a dev on our team out for a whole website design, but this little part we could. Like we have somebody that could devote like a half day to that and knock that out. And that's really you're solving problems, right? Like sometimes you can't take it from soup to nuts or whatever, but like that's problem solving and just being realistic about what can be done. And again, you don't know what you don't know. So getting these dev skills, just understanding the basics, is going to allow you to speak, much more effectively in those conversations. Because really, you're consulting in that role, and that just already takes you beyond just being, like the designer who can knock out the wireframes or whatever. You're consulting on the total solution of the problem, even if you're not literally gonna write that code yourself. You can let them know the best path forward. So it's helpful in all these non-obvious ways as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we'll move into our next segment, which is opening a can. Matt, do you have a can you want to open today?
Yeah, I think my mind's still on the AI episode that we filmed recently. It makes me think too, because like there's always debate in the design community, especially about these we call them design platforms, but really, if you're a designer, the gap it's closing is the dev part. Hopefully, you're still wanting to do the design work, but it just gets me thinking about like we're gonna go through this era now of the magical AI buttons. Like here's your wireframe, or here's an actual whole site. It just makes me think as a designer, like I don't think they're very good, at least yet. You're just sort of getting something. Maybe it's a starting point. That's fine. There's it's not here to hate on that, but it's like if you're a designer and you really like to design, like optimizing to just toss your own design skills out by way of like a button is kind of a weird mindset. And it's one I've been thinking a lot about. So I think it's like opening a can up on myself here about like how to use AI tools and how to leverage them. It's like really I love designing and solving problems for people. and I still think that, you know, we're much better at doing that than an AI button is. Like, and we might even be really way better if we brainstorm using AI or whatever. But for me, I'm like, I still want to make great designs that like maybe can only come out of me, but they're the best ones I can do. So just staying focused on that, like whatever tools you might want to use between, you know, the beginning and end of a project are sort of neither here nor there, whether it's AI or not. Like you should still be driven by like wanting to be a great designer or a great dev. Like that's what you can bring to the table. And a lot of what we talked about today makes me think about like, oh, I can bring a lot more to the table because I stepped through some of the things we talked about today and struggled through some of the things that we talked about today. But it's so much more fun to be a designer because the hidden parts of the design are just as important as the cool parts we make on the front end. And I think AI is always going to struggle. It's like, here's a site. It's amazing. It's cool. It is like the magic trick element of this, but you're not anywhere close to done, and you don't even understand what AI just gave you. So if your clients have a question like, what do you do there? You're like, I don't know. I basically just feed stuff in and I smash this button. Like, I don't know if it's right or not. I don't know if it fits what we talked about in discovery. Like, I know we're all hoping it is, you know, so it's just like, it puts you in an awkward spot. So for me, I'm like, I'm just going to keep this simple. It's like, maybe it's a tool I can use here or there. Maybe it's just interesting or cool or fun. Maybe it helps me think about it in a new way, just like Webflow did. But it's like, I still really like being a designer. I don't really want to like cut that part of my work as a designer out.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely leads to an existential crisis. And I think for me, like an example I can think of is for, you know, it's pertinent to me right now because I'm taking the time and investing into learning Japanese because we're going to take a vacation to Japan, and I was like, well, I'm just going to learn it. You know, and how good is my Japanese going to be by the time I go there? Right? It's going to be elementary, basic at best. But at the same time, like, I think someone can just be like, well, why don't you just pull up Google and just like put it over something and it would just like translate it for you. But I was like, yeah, that could happen, but like part of it is like that joy of like knowing that I'm investing the time and I'm getting better at Japanese. I understand the structure of the language better, how it works, and when I like listen to anything that's Japanese, I can like make out words. I can understand what they're saying. You know, it just like it opens a lot of like mental doors, I guess, right? And I think that's the caution here was like AI is using it instead. Like, what doors are you willing to close as a designer when you kind of like put this at the forefront of your arsenal? It's because it's definitely gonna close a lot of doors. If you like at some point you can be like, am I even a designer anymore? Like,
Right. It's like I'm a prompt writer.
Yeah, I don't even design anything anymore. I didn't make this. Like, so yeah, it's definitely something that, like you said, is on your mind and on mine as well. Kind of thinking about like, at what point is this just supplementing and improve, like helping, and at where do we then just allow it to just replace like part of who we are?
I always want to be able to at least speak to the design choices that I made. You know, like it's almost impossible to do that. And I think, you know, if you're just trying to shoot off a site and just get something up, like that's a totally different thing than what we're talking about today. It's like, sure, you know, like go for it. You're probably not going to need what we do to just have something exist. You know, that's why Wix and Squarespace have been making lots of money for lots of years. It's like, it does solve a problem, but it's a different one than what we're talking about. And I think those different problems are the ones that we love to solve for our clients. And I think are always going to require this like weird mixture of things that we have learned and understand over time and are passionate about doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And going back to the Japanese thing, like you can have AI just write out something to say in Japanese, but if someone asks you like, "What are you saying?" Like, out of these words that make a sentence, like what is it? What is it saying? You're like, I don't know. I want to be able to explain it. Like, no, this is what this means. And you and I were just in the car like not too long ago, and I was explaining the structure of how like sentences that come together, those things like that. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that if I just like had a Google just write the translation for me. Like, I wouldn't know. So, but I do now.
The more nuance there is too, it's like you're going to end up spending as much time trying to like AI it out. It's like, just have these skills. Like you can just do it, like, and until the AI takes us all over and replaces us entirely, like it's like I guess I'll just go like hang out on the beach or whatever when that happens. But until then, I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, with that, we'll finish up that can. We'll jump into some nugs. So, Matt, you got any spicy nugs for us today?
Really, just more of a recap. Just remembering, like, don't let the code part scare you or feel daunting. Like, it probably will at first, just like anything new. But Webflow lets you experiment for free. Like, you don't have to even do anything. Just sign up and, like I said, try to recreate something, mess around with it. It's low pressure, and take it from there. It's a really valuable skill, so give yourself that space to learn it. It could really like change your life from a financial standpoint, or change how your agency works, like it did for us. But it's been hard to find any downside to that investment. So just kind of recapping the day, this is like sort of what I wish someone would have told me. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think my nug is a recap of your recap, and it's basically that we were just talking about like AI or whatever and technology, but at the end of the day, like where we are moving in this like no code world is that there's becoming less and less of a distinction between design and dev, and that's part of like the value prop of like these like no code solutions is that you can play both on TV. But with that said, like if you're gonna limit yourself to just being a designer and not doing anything in the dev, then that's fine. Just you do you. We're not going to tell you to do anything, but you just have to be ready as like we progress in this space with these tools, these no-code tools. You have to be able to have a good answer for your potential customers of why you're just purely a designer and why you're not a developer, and why this is better than hiring someone who can do both. Like you may be a really great designer, but you may not be able to like actually bring that design to life. So we may be okay designers, but we can bring it to life. Like so, not saying there's the right or wrong answer here, but your client's gonna be choosing between the two. Which are they gonna choose? They might choose you, they might choose us, and rather them choose you. So give this a shot and try it out. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But just know that you're leaving money on the table potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, at least do it consciously, right? And making those steps mindfully, especially like small agencies or freelancers, like really knowing what you excel at can make all the difference. So this is definitely a lucrative and been a positive pathway for us. So give it a shot.
Yeah. So well, everybody, that's another episode in the can. Just dropped another banger for you, even though it was about code and dev. I think it was pretty banging. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. You made it to the end. So as always, either you were too lazy to change the channel, you might be just listening to this while you're trying to find a parking space at Costco. We know how that is. Or you absolutely loved it since you're giving us your time, and you're still here. So either way, please subscribe to the channel. Help us out. We still need that sponsor. It's still dead air right now. We didn't play that one, but we'll just go ahead and say that it's still dead air. Please help us not change that. And we'll be rolling out more Webflow and design content weekly, maybe daily, maybe who knows, whenever we feel like it. So subscribe, check it out, ask questions, comments. If whatever you want us to talk about, drop it down there. We've had people ask us about talking about dinosaurs in our workshops before, so we would throw that in there. So we're open to it. Yeah. All right, we're going to end the show. So go ahead and do it. Subscribe.